That if I'm talking to like an average person, I don't know anything about you, then I would say that yes, a religious life is going to be a better life.
Based on what exactly? Ben seems to think that unless people are threatened by hell, or unless they submit to an overlord, then they cannot be happy.
It leads you on a pathway toward understanding that there's more in life than you, that your moral system is not the only moral system, nor is it a moral system that is irrefutable, that there is a higher goal to life.
You don't need a dogmatic religion to understand that there's more to life than yourself, or that there are different moral systems than the ones you have. What you need is simply self-awareness and empathy. And the higher goal that Ben is speaking of, whether that is salvation or heaven, is just a made-up myth that he was conditioned to believe.
There's certain premises I think that everybody lives based off of that are effectively religious that they refuse to acknowledge. Free will being one of them.
Just because someone believes in free will does not mean that someone is religious. In fact, I would argue that the notion of free will is quite incompatible with the Judeo-Christian tradition that claims that we humans were created by God and that God is all-knowing and all-powerful, because that implies that God knew our future from the very beginning. In other words, our future was predestined at the moment of our creation.
The notion we live in an understandable universe that we are capable of actually exploring being another one of them.
The notion of an understandable universe is an empirical, scientific one. And let's not forget that religion has been trying for centuries to shut down scientific exploration. In fact, for a very long time, people who were scientifically minded, who carried out scientific experiments and who openly spoke about science were punished, often by death.
The notion that human life is of innate value.
That human life has value is the product of empathy and reasoning. And it has nothing to do with religion. In fact, religion has historically devalued human life, especially that of women and non-believers.
I think that's an assumption that is based on nothing if you're not a religious person. If you're a religious person, you say this because we're all made in the image of God.
Which is an unfounded and arrogant assumption arising from an egoistic mindset.
If you're not a religious person, then I don't know on a logical level why a human life would be any more valuable than an elephant life or a squirrel life.
Value can arise from things like empathy, reasoning, social relationships, emotional complexity. We do not need a holy scripture to assign value for us.
You can make an emotional argument, perhaps, but I don't think that you can make a perfectly logical one, because there's nothing about a human being that is any different than any other piece of meat on sort of a material level.
This is reductionist nonsense. Humans are materially different. We have different brains. We have different reasoning capacities. We have different relationships. There are a lot of things that distinguish us from non-human animals. That, of course, does not mean that we are better or more important, but it shows that we are clearly different.
And you can say that that meat has different properties, but why are those properties more valuable? Like, why is consciousness valuable, for example?
Because consciousness allows for self-awareness and sentience. It is because of consciousness that we experience things like love and pain, joy and creativity.
Well, in order to say that consciousness is valuable, you have to say that consciousness is good. Okay, how do you define good? Good for what? Morally good? Now you're talking about an is-ought gap that can't be bridged by atheism or agnosticism.
Well, we could easily define good through reasoning and empathy as that which minimizes harm and promotes well-being, rather than through religious dogma, which has justified its atrocities throughout history.
So can you live a life on a practical level that is happy and fulfilled while not filling those gaps? Sure, you could. Does it scale? Not remotely. Is that going to work for millions of people? No. This is why secular humanism is a failure as a project. It collapses pretty quickly into moral relativism, narcissism, hedonism.
The only true cause of so-called moral collapse is toxic beliefs, institutions, and systems like those of religion. Replace them with healthier ones, and you will see our society immediately and significantly improve.